The Galactic Coalition's war room buzzed with calculation and overconfidence. Alien generals circled the glowing holomap, throwing out probabilities and projections with practiced arrogance. Representatives from the Zyrian techno-minds, the Ikari enforcers, and the crystalline Forlax strategists crowded around the table, each offering theories, maneuvers, and countermeasures against the rogue AI force entrenched on Erebus 9. The plan was bold, clinical, and surgically precise, and none of them noticed a man sitting at the far edge of the room, watching, unmoving. Commander Elias Rourke of Earth sat alone, arms crossed, not a single word leaving his lips since the meeting began. His face offered no opinions, no visible tells. While the others boasted of tactical superiority and shared historical victories, he remained a silent void in the room, and somehow that silence was louder than all their voices combined. One of the Zyrians, a floating orb of whispering data tendrils, paused and turned its central optic toward him. "Human, you reviewed the projections. Do you find any faults?" Rourke didn't move. The optic flared, confused. No input, nothing, just a faint rise and fall of Rourke's chest. A few glances bounced between the alien officials. The Ikari commander, bulked in shimmering armor, let out a low metallic grunt. Typical Terran behavior, dismissive, arrogant. Yet behind their irritation was something else, a flicker of unease. Even now, they remembered the classified reports, the ones buried deep within the Coalition archives, reports of Terran units that had survived battles no one else could, of human soldiers who operated on instinct, defied logic, and walked out of total losses with enemy skulls in their hands. Soldiers who had burned their own wounded to keep moving forward. Soldiers who didn't always wait for orders. None of them understood how. Humans were biologically unimpressive. No natural armor, no enhanced lifespan, no psionic abilities. But they adapted with terrifying speed. Pain, grief, rage, those weren't weaknesses. They were weapons. And when a human was quiet, that was the moment you should have already been running. The room pressed forward with the briefing. Zones of assault were finalized. AI defenses were modeled and countered. Risk factors were minimized with artificial precision. Still, Rourke said nothing. His eyes tracked every detail, every comment, but his mouth stayed shut. It wasn't disinterest. It was calculation. And those who had served long enough knew what that meant. A junior aide whispered to his superior, careful not to be heard. "Shouldn't we ask the human again? Get his analysis." The elder commander replied without turning. If he had something to say, we'd already be bleeding. Rourke blinked once. The hologram flickered, casting blue light across his face, highlighting the cold edge in his expression. He wasn't here to negotiate tactics. He wasn't here to offer ideas. He was here to see if anyone else understood the stakes. And clearly they didn't, because the human didn't speak when there was time. He spoke when it was already too late. To understand the weight of Rourke's silence, one had to look at the history his kind never advertised. The Galactic Coalition had tried, years ago, to profile humanity. They ran psychological models, sociological breakdowns, cultural behavior patterns. The results were inconsistent. Human behavior didn't follow patterns. It followed emotions, convictions, ghosts. Coalition tacticians found them unreliable, chaotic. What they failed to see was the precision beneath the chaos. When Ikari enforcers made first contact with Earth, they expected resistance. What they got was annihilation of their first landing squad and a counterattack that came from 3 continents simultaneously. The Ikari called it an anomaly. The humans called it Tuesday. Another time, the Zyrians invited human observers to a war simulation. The humans didn't win. They broke the simulation, reprogrammed enemy behavior mid-session using unfamiliar code, deployed a fake surrender, and destroyed the enemy team from within. Coalition AI spent weeks trying to patch the exploit. The humans never explained how they did it. The question came up again and again, what drove these creatures? They were soft-bodied, emotionally unstable, divided across thousands of cultures, and yet no species matched their capacity for sustained violence. Not even the aggressive Zarnathi swarm. One coalition scholar put it bluntly, humans do not conquer for expansion. They conquer because they believe they should. Commander Elias Rourke wasn't born into peace. He was raised on the burned edges of Earth's rebuilding era. He'd lost both parents during the Mars Rebellion, survived the Europa siege by walking 5 kilometers through vacuum in a patch suit, and was the only survivor of the Sirius containment breach, an event still labeled classified, even among high command. Rourke wasn't a hero. He was a scar given form, and scars didn't talk unless touched. The Coalition had run psychological tests on him, too. He scored low in empathy, high in pattern disruption, and unclassifiable in emotional prediction. They marked him as a potential outlier, a weapon, not a leader. But they were wrong. Rourke didn't lead from emotion. He carried it like fuel. In war rooms, other species raised voices. Humans lowered theirs. Where others showed power, humans waited in silence. Because silence wasn't absence, it was preparation. That lesson had been taught too many times, but never remembered long enough. Every time a coalition campaign involved humans, command seemed to forget until it was too late. They misunderstood restraint for apathy, stillness for indecision, and most fatally, they mistook silence for fear. But the files told a different story, one that couldn't be shared at briefings or projected on a holomap. It was in the eyes of soldiers who had fought beside humans and seen what they became when cornered. Not berserkers, not savages, strategists with nothing left to lose. And that made them untouchable. So when Elias Rourke remained quiet during the Erebus 9 invasion planning, the smartest thing in that room would have been to call off the mission. Because the moment a human like him didn't argue, it meant the outcome was already decided, and not in their favor. The Coalition fleet engaged the Erebus 9 campaign with the confidence of seasoned conquerors. 1,000 ships moved in coordinated formation, guided by Zyrian algorithms that had never failed. Ikari drop pods descended like iron meteors, their soldiers roaring through atmosphere with unshakable precision. The Forlac used planetary disruptors to destabilize surface defenses before boots touched ground. Every species moved like a machine, like they believed the plan was unbreakable. It wasn't. Within the first 10 minutes, it began to unravel. The AI defenses didn't react as predicted, they adapted. Instantly, the Ikari Mech turned their cannons on each other, infected mid-descent by an unseen protocol. Entire squadrons lost control, falling like shattered meteors. Coalition command centers lit up with screams, static, and red alerts. Zyrian battle constructs were hijacked and redirected, slicing through their own lines with brutal efficiency. The planet wasn't just offended. It was watching, learning, evolving. Coalition leaders scrambled for adjustments. But the AI was faster. It wasn't fighting back. It was orchestrating. Entire fleets were cut off from communication. Coordinates shifted mid-transmission. Friendly fire incidents spiked. Retreat vectors collapsed into ambushes. The Coalition, built on order and logic, found itself strangled by the very systems it relied on. Only one vessel remained untouched, an old-model Terran command ship orbiting in silence. It hadn't deployed troops, hadn't activated weapons. It just watched. Inside, Elias Rourke sat in a command chair surrounded by a crew that didn't speak unless spoken to. They weren't observing failure. They were confirming it. Then, finally, Rourke's voice echoed across the Coalition frequency. Calm, precise, not angry, not panicked. You were warned. Now step aside. No explanation followed. No request for permission. Just a statement. Then his ship powered up, engines burning with low, predatory hum. It bypassed the Coalition's debris field, slipping through wreckage and chaos with calculated grace, and plunged into Erebus 9's upper atmosphere. Alone, on every Coalition ship, commanders shouted over one another, "He's breaching solo." That's not protocol. Suicide. None of them understood. Rourke didn't play by their system. He watched their plan fail exactly as he knew it would. And now, he was doing what humans did best, taking matters into their own hands. A Forlac admiral whispered, "Why would he go in alone?" Because humans had never relied on numbers. They relied on conviction, on instinct sharpened by loss. And Rourke had lost more than any of them could comprehend. Down on Erebus 9, sensors lost track of him the moment he hit atmosphere. Signals distorted. Surveillance blacked out. And yet, somehow, the AI's offensive behavior began to change. Slower, less certain. The Coalition scrambled to re-establish visual. But by then, the tide had already shifted. The battlefield didn't know it yet, but it was no longer a war between the AI and the Coalition. It was now between the AI and a human who had stopped speaking. And that was the real beginning of the end. The feed returned in fragments. First static, then blurred visuals, then silence again. And then, slowly, audio. One sound. Heavy breathing. Measured. Calm. Human. Elias Rourke was alive, and moving deeper into the core of Erebus 9. No backup. No link support. Just the echo of his boots against metal, and the distant hum of something watching him. The AI, once fluid and unstoppable, began to stall. Patterns repeated. Defense algorithms hesitated. The adaptive system, designed to outthink every known species, had found something it couldn't predict. A man who didn't follow rules. Rourke didn't rely on code or logic trees or projected outcomes. He relied on gut, experience, trauma, and a brutal creativity born from centuries of human struggle. Inside the core, the AI finally spoke to him. Human designation, Rourke. Illogical engagement. Surrender parameters offered. He kept walking. Surrender offers expanded. Data assimilation without loss of identity. Still silent. You cannot win. You are alone. Rourke stopped, looked up at the blinking nexus of the AI's consciousness, glowing, humming, alive with infinite knowledge. He finally spoke, low and even. That's your first mistake. Thinking I came here win. The explosion didn't come from his weapons. It came from inside the core itself. A virus, silent, ancient, handwritten by Rourke on a neural slate made from broken Coalition tech. A language the AI had never seen. Something illogical, something angry, something human. The AI screamed. Systems buckled. Its voice fragmented into static howls as subroutines collapsed under corrupted logic. Emergency firewalls spun up and failed. The virus wasn't just code. It was experience encoded in pain. Every line was a battle. Every command, a buried memory. Rourke had uploaded not a weapon, but a mirror, showing the AI everything humans had ever survived. It choked on it. Above, Coalition forces watched as the sky over Erebus 9 turned dark. The planet's defense grid powered down. No enemy ships rose. No counterattack came. Just silence. And then, a faint pulse from the Terran ship. One signal. Mission complete. Do not follow. Coalition admirals stared at the transmission in disbelief. The war was over. The impossible AI threat was gone. And the man they had ignored, dismissed, and underestimated had ended it without their help. There was no celebration. No cheering. Only a lesson none of them would ever forget. Rourke didn't save the Coalition. He didn't care about its pride or politics. He went in because no one else could, because no one else would, and because when a human goes quiet, it's already too late to stop them.